Today's session, 2 points of view at two. I'm Rex Black, president of RBCS. We are a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. We have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and expert services to companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. As a follow-up to my popular keynote and webinar, Stupid Metrics Tricks and How to Avoid Them, I, as a testing metrics advocate, decided to have a discussion with fellow testing professional Don Haynes, who is a testing metrics skeptic, about how we use and all too often abuse metrics in software. There's sure to be some interesting disagreements as well as some unexpected agreements. So let me put the bio up here. There we go. Happy to welcome Dawn Haynes to this presentation. She has been in IT for over 35 years in various capacities: system administrator, project management, DBA, technical support, QA and test, build engineering, training, course development, consulting, and they say head chef and bottle washer, I think is the phrase that often gets. Bartender.
Bartender is actually on the resume.
Okay, that's good. So then I guess you can confirm or refute something that somebody once told me in a class. That she had worked as a bartender. She said the number one thing that she learned as a bartender is the worst thing that can ever happen to you is if somebody breaks a glass in the ice.
Oh, that's a disaster.
Yeah, because then all your ice is contaminated and
got to start all over again.
Yeah.
Good time.
There you go. See that? I learn things every day.
True.
So with all of these different past perspectives, including what to do with a bucket of spoiled ice, Dawn now just calls herself a testing and quality coach. Dawn has observed throughout her career that the challenges we have with software quality and how to fit testing into projects is fairly systemic. I would say that's very true. Experience in insurance, healthcare, custom software, and commercial software, she has seen the same issues plague teams and organizations over and over again, and so have I. So
that's why we still have jobs, right?
Yes, yeah, right. If the software development teams were better at learning from their mistakes, we'd be unemployed.
Anything about that? It's true. We'd move on to the next. But hey, we're still here. We're just trying to help each other out, and everybody can do that in their own way too. Everything that you learn, you think everybody else knows. It's not true.
Probably not.
You can share your epiphanies, no matter how small.
Yep.
And they will probably help other people shift and come along with you.
Yep, and you may never know which one really stirs thought. So
True.
I'm going to mention one of those just a moment here to kind of kick things off. So a couple housekeeping notes before we do that. If you do have any questions during the course of the webinar, submit them throughout the presentation via your webinar interface, but please note that we will answer them at the end. We have 30 minutes scheduled for this, so we're going to talk for about 15 minutes or so starting now, and then reserve the last, say, 10 minutes for Q&A. So try to think of some good questions while we're talking. So yeah, the yesterday I was in the office because it's COVID days. So, what's there to do but work? If a client gives you billable hours that you can bill, sit and bill them, right? It's not like
all days are days.
Yes, they all kind of run together. So I was sitting in the office and was going through a client's unified test automation strategy. And in that document, they were talking about counting up test cases at various levels and comparing them to make sure that they were following the test automation pyramid. And I said out loud in my office, it's a metaphor, not a metric. And I posted that on Twitter, and it actually was quite a hit. So yeah, it was one of those things that seems so obvious to me. It's like, no, you're taking cone too literally. That's not how he meant that. But anyway, that's that's an example of something that people think of as a metric, right? A test case metric, which is of course not valid because unit test cases and system test cases are completely different sizes and very difficult to compare in a whole bunch of different ways. And so adding up numeric counts of them and comparing those would be just kind of like, huh? You know?
It's definitely mixing metaphors. It's like,
Yep.
the difference between quantitative and qualitative measures.
Mhm.
I've yet to figure out how to count quality, and I've yet to figure out how to count done, but yet we seem to have an obsession with counting, right? And measuring and comparing. It's the same thing with velocity and, story points and things like that. That's how a lot of agile, transitions go sideways.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Yeah. So um, I thought I'd just throw that out there to kick us off here. So we have metrics, but do we use them right? Do we misuse them? And I thought you brought up in our email when we were discussing this a quote that's variously attributed to either Box or Deming, but apparently it's like goes way back.
Yeah.
All models are wrong, but some are useful.
Mm-hmm.
And a metric, of course, is a model, right? It's a way of modeling something that we're trying to measure. Say, well, we're going to measure this, and it's going to tell us that, right?
Right.
So there's also, of course, the inevitable Lord Kelvin quote here, the famous quote about metrics, right? You can measure what you're speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. And when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. So um, the pyramid thing, of course, is an example of possible misuse or attempted misuse of a metric, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes with the best of intentions. The thing that I've come across with metrics sometimes and fairly frequently is that they do give you these kind of insights that Kelvin's talking about here. And I'll give you an example. I was doing an assessment for a client, and they were in the industrial controls business, and they. I was looking at their defect data, and they had a very high rate of false positives. A lot of defect reports that were reported turned out to ultimately be not actually defects. And so I asked people, why do you think that is? And almost to a person outside of the QA team, the response I got was the QA people don't have enough actual production experience. They haven't used the system. They haven't worked in factories. They haven't worked in pharmaceutical plants. They haven't worked in oil refineries. This is where our systems are used. Most of them haven't been there very long, or if at all, in those settings. So they don't know what expected behavior is. So this is like
making an assumption based on the numbers.
This is a commonly received wisdom here, right? Or at least a commonly held conclusion.
Yeah.
So if I had just gone off and said, okay, well, that certainly sounds reasonable to me, and it did sound like a reasonable conjecture. If I had put in my report, you shouldn't have anybody in your QA team that has less than X years of experience. They probably would have gone with that. They would have probably let a bunch of their testers go. But I was like, this is kind of a serious thing to recommend. I better drill into this further and make sure that the data actually supports this conclusion. So I asked the director of QA to get me a spreadsheet with 2 columns of numbers, and I said, I don't need the names, but what I need is for each tester, I need the number of years of what they call plant experience, as actual working in a pharmaceutical factory or what have you, right?
Okay.
The number of years of plant experience and their own personal false positive rate.
Oh, yeah, well, that gets you more data, slice and dice it. Yeah.
Yep. So I take that data and I will fire up Excel, one of my favorite things in the whole world to do, and pop that data in there and create a scatter plot, and Shazam, no correlation. It's like the R squared value is like 0.05 or 6 or something like that. It looked like a shotgun blast, which is basically means, there's no correlation. There's definitely no causality, right? It doesn't go the other way around, but you could say if there's no correlation, there's certainly no causality.
Yeah.
So it turned out that there were other things that were going on that were probably much more powerful factors, like the fact that they told the testers to use the business requirements as their single source of truth for what the expected results are. But then they had a set of design requirements that were elaborated from that were used by the developers to decide how the system was supposed to work. And they didn't do any sort of decent traceability between those and reconciliation when changes were made. So, they were basically they had handed the test team a flawed test oracle, and that was part of what was happening. So, I bring that up as kind of like that's simultaneously potential misuse of a metric, but also how a metric ended up being very helpful. So
if you did it the right thing, if you did it the right thing, right? And I think I like there's an interesting comparison about one of the things that we tend to track, which is bug find rates. So without classifying them at all, just by date or time into the project, and that alone, it could look like it tells you something, but there's some other data that might be useful, like how many tests did you run?
Oh, yeah.
How many changes were made, between each, call it test run or test day or, wherever it is that you're tracking it. So if you ran this many tests and found this many bugs, well, that's a telling story. If you ran this many tests and found this many bugs, that's a telling story. But one without the other doesn't really get it for you. And I think we've been indoctrinated to some of those things. Look at a single piece of data out of context and think, oh, we know what that means, or that looks like this, so it must mean that. And I think that's where things go off the skids a little bit.
I saw an example of that, just recently. So the one of my clients is gonna they're tracking defect detection effectiveness, which I like. That's a good metric, right? Keep track of how good you are at finding bugs relative to what gets out there in production. So, but they were doing it. They're showing a trend, which I'm a big fan of trend charts. I like trend charts, but you got to be careful with trend charts because they don't show you what causes the trend.
Right.
And if you don't include enough data or your period is too short, you get all sorts of volatility problems with the trends, right? And stuff that's not actually signal is in there, but you confuse it. So they were calculating this monthly, defect detection effectiveness on a monthly basis. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this and see how it's going up and down and up and down and up and down. Well, I bet that when it goes down, that's because you're in a period where the QA folks are spending most of their time developing new tests and not executing tests. Meanwhile, something's just going out into production. So that's generating a lot of production bugs. Right. So there you got a bunch of volatility in there. Wink, 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 wink. I said, look, what you need is like a rolling 3-month or 6-month or 12-month average to smooth that out. And then you look at a longer term trend over time, right? You can actually learn something from that.
We have a lot of those issues in performance testing. Like when you're doing a measurement, if you look at a measurement for too small a period of time, something could look significant, whereas, if you look at it over a longer period of time, it becomes insignificant. And sometimes vice versa. If you look at too much data, sometimes, if you look at an average or, something like that, you've just blown the the meaning of the data. So one of my favorite books, I like Lord Kelvin's quote there, and I think Deming also said something similar. You can't manage what you can't measure, something like that.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite little books that sort of helped me along the way to understand some of the potential potholes and pitfalls and challenges we have with this is called How to Lie with Statistics.
And a famous book.
Yeah, I think it was written in the 30s or the 50s or something like that.
It's been around, yeah.
But the graphics in it give you beautiful examples, especially around things like averages. One of my favorite is if you have one foot in a bucket of ice water and the other foot in a bucket of boiling water, on average, you're comfortable.
Yep,
what does that mean?
Famous quote, yeah.
That's not a thing. And the mean, median, mode, like how frequently a number appears versus, what the numbers actually mean. So I think I got onto this in my career way before I got into testing. It had to do with a quality measurement of people in tech support. So we worked for a wholly owned subsidiary of Big Xerox. Big Xerox had just won the Malcolm Baldrige Award for quality. Yay us. I mean, we were so proud. We had no reason to be proud. We were just a little garage band software company that they had bought. But I'm thinking we can learn a lot about quality because they must know.
Mhm.
And so all these metrics came down, and one of them was around our customer service and technical support. So there were 8 of us, and the mandate was we need to collect metrics about how many calls you take and how long it takes you to close a call.
Okay.
And that's going to tell us what the quality is. And I was the person collating all of this, and I was also the only person not doing desktop support. I was doing API support. So my customers were developers that were communicating to me via email.
Right.
And if they had a problem, it wasn't going to be like reboot, try this,
Yeah.
try that, and hang up. And oh, by the way, what is the thing about when you measure something, people's behavior changes? I can't.
It's variously called the Hawthorne effect or the Westinghouse effect. Yeah, but
So
yeah.
what I heard my colleagues doing was try this, try that, try this, try that, try this, try that. And if none of those things work, call us back and we will open a new call. Click. So it created behaviors that were bad. And I told my management, I'm like, okay, I don't need to run a single set of metrics. According to these, I suck. I give terrible support, although you've never heard from a single one of my customers because they're all satisfied and we're all working with them. So it's easy to focus on directly the wrong thing, but you still have a need for this information. And that's my struggle, right? So I became a skeptic pretty early on in my career due to misuse, but it's not like it's easy to find something that would be better. So in training classes, to this day, people are always asking me, well, my management is asking me for these kind of metrics, like let's say it's test case metrics. How many we planned, how many we executed, how many pass failed. And I've never been able to figure out how that tells anybody something about release readiness. Because
tells you about progress against your plan.
Right. A little bit.
That's what it tells you. It tells you, have I run the test that I plan to run?
Yep, that's it. And your plan can change. And so I think in projects, we're typically uncomfortable with change, except change happens all the time. So I could plan to run a test and somebody decides to change something, change a requirement, add a feature. All of a sudden I'm replanning and readjusting, and it gets kind of messy in there because things in projects are quite dynamic.
Did you ever read Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow?
Love that book.
You remember that part in there about the study that they did? They had that elaborate team exercise for selecting officers who was going to get promoted to officer's rank in IDF.
Yep.
And involved figuring out how to get a telephone pole over a fence or something like that, right? and they did that longitudinal study like some number of years after putting that plan in place, and were like, oh, okay, there's actually no correlation whatsoever between how people score on this exercise and how well they do in their career. But then he said, but we kept doing it anyway because we couldn't think of anything else. Right. So that we do that all the time. And it's not just in software. It's like, this is a thing that this is what is measurable.
Right.
And so we're going to measure it. Right. No matter what, even though it's going to skew behaviors and people are going to figure out how to game that thing. So there's your classic misuse, right? That was my stupid metric tricks and how to avoid them. That Hawthorne effect was one of the central.
It's a cautionary tale, right? And you all need them. And I ran into one that surprised me. This was while I was at Rational, and I could talk about them because they don't technically exist anymore. But we were having a late release, and big management came in and squatted in our building and made everybody nervous because that's always great. And somehow this high-level VP got access to an internal wiki that basically said daily, how many tests we ran, how many passed or failed. So say it was like this. On Monday, we had 100, we executed 199, passed, 1 failed. It's all good in his mind. Right. On Tuesday, clearly we had a bug fix, we had a new release, and now we have retesting to do. And that's what people forget about. Right? It's like, we're not done just because we executed them once. We're going to have to them again.
Go back and run them again.
Tuesday rolls along and we execute 100 tests, and 1 pass, 99 fail.
Nice.
This guy flipped out. He like bounded into the QA lab screaming at everybody at the top of his lungs. And I went in there like, dude, what are you doing? Stop. Let's go out in the parking lot. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, I've had that conversation.
Right. It's like, what are you taking from this information that, oh, by the way, we didn't give you? First of all, this
my mistake was I gave it. My mistake was that I gave it to that person and then expected them to not misinterpret it, which is where I learned don't show test case counts to managers.
No.
show them other things.
He said, he's like, yesterday I thought we were almost done, and today it seems that we haven't even started. And I went, okay. I now know that can be misconstrued.
Yep.
And now it's my life's work to make sure we don't do that. So if we're going to put, information, not data, that's the other thing. Sometimes we give people raw data and we let them interpret it, but they're for us. Like that helps us manage what we do, tweak what we do, and understand what we're doing because we have data over time. We get trends. We start to understand things, and hopefully it tells us something useful. And if it doesn't, hopefully we dump it.
One of the graphics I had in that stupid metrics tricks slides was a water cannon being used against a protester, and I was like, we sometimes do that to our stakeholders. We just unleash this water cannon of data on them. And then we're like surprised when they're knocked off their feet by it and have no clue as to what to make of it all. It's like, you're supposed to give them insight, right? Not raw data, insight.
And I think it goes back to this is a point we can probably break for questions after this. But if you think about what does each person in an organization or in a team really know about testing? And very little. Chances are most of us fall into testing with no education, books or training or otherwise. We just do it because it's human to test. So we know how to test, we know how to observe, we know how to share information, but not necessarily in these ways. We don't know test design techniques. There's plenty of things that we can learn to become better. But what do you think your project manager or product owner knows about testing? Maybe nothing. What do you think your dev manager know about testing? Maybe nothing. So I think we forget sometimes that the people we're working with to land this project safely may not have the insight that we do. And sometimes I think we're a little shy about saying, hey, what do you think this means? Because I want to make sure you're seeing it, you're understanding it the way I am, and that it's helpful to you. Because maybe we can give you something else.
I think that's a great point. And I think also to add on to that, I think that the test management tool vendors have done a particularly bad job at helping us out on that, because the test management tools have all these built-in reports that are perfectly fine for the tester, the test lead, the test manager. They give this nice tactical view and a great deal of detail, but they don't allow you to typically, or at least not very easily, extract insight that's relevant to non-test stakeholders. And they just,
and like with the the test manager tool had this test coverage report. And it was, the tests were tied to requirements, right? So in theory, this is requirements coverage. And so you put that in the hands of a project manager and they think, oh, we have tests that cover all the requirements. All these have been executed. We must be done. That's not what happened.
Then you have to have the verification versus validation conversation, right? Yes, we have verified that all the specifications are met, but is it fit for use? That's a different question.
Totally.
So we have some questions.
There's a couple good questions like test pyramid. Do you want me to share? Can I share?
Sure.
Let me see. Not seeing.
I said panelists can share.
Okay.
Saying that I have to.
I think I can. So the question about the test automation pyramid.
Yeah, there we go.
I just wanted to show you. This is what I do. I just do a Google search, and there's lots and lots of ways that this can be represented.
Right.
But you were talking about the specific measurement, because they don't all have measurements. Like this one doesn't, but this one does. So if
Yeah.
we look at this one, right, it's saying you need 70% here, 20% here, 10% there. And well, now I'm confused about this. 70, 80, 90, 100. What the heck is in this bubble? I guess that's maybe part of the 10%. I don't know.
Yeah. And show me the math behind that calculation, and I will show you a mathematical lie. Right.
And
Or not lie, but just it's like somebody is taking, they've got temperature measured in Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin, and they're just adding all those numbers up and calculating percentages from it without converting, right? And it's actually, I think it's worse than that, because it's like how nobody's ever showed me a credible way of converting. Like, what are you going to do based on the average number of lines of code covered by the tests at each level? I mean, I suppose you could do that, but that's not really that's not the proper metric of coverage at the system level anyway. So
I think it's more like a distribution. It's sort of like Brian Merrick's agile testing quadrants.
Yeah.
Say you need to have so much here and there. He just said, there's 4 different kinds of tests that you can have.
Don't ignore
forget.
them. Don't forget any of the 4. Right.
Just like verification, validation, and this is about this is about really having test automation that can support you for the duration. And so if you look at this one, it talks about brittle tests, right? So all I'm saying is, don't have brittle tests that you don't need. Right? If they can be put here or here, leverage automation to do that, and then make sure you do testing around things that are dynamically changing in a safer way that doesn't cost you time and effort.
Yep.
Like that's it. So if you followed a formula instead of a numeric guideline, I think you'd be better off.
Right. Yeah. It just as I said, it's a metaphor. It's not a metric, and you just have to think. And there are other things you can measure, right? Like you can measure false positive rates at different levels, right? And that gives you some feel for, look, we're getting too top heavy here. We're going from pyramid to snow cone, and we've got a lot of false positives that we're dealing with now. So.
Or automation failures and maintenance that goes along with that.
Yeah, maintenance effort.
That's an indication that things might be brittle, but they might not be brittle for the reason that you think. They just might have been designed poorly. Data could be a problem. Environment reset, and data management could be a problem. There's lots of places you can look to fix that stuff, but these numbers won't tell you that.
Right. Yeah. This as a this is like simplifying something too much and in exactly the wrong direction. Right. It's just more complicated than that. And but it is a good metaphorical way of thinking. Big amounts of unit tests, medium amounts of integration tests working at APIs, small amounts of automated GUI tests. Just doesn't need to be any more than that.
I like it. So,
well, what else have we got? We got another question there, I thought, too, don't we?
Stefano, sorry if I get his name wrong. What do you think of the test automation coverage metric? I'm just in a project where, due to DevOps, there is the dream to automate everything. And I get that. I hear it all the time.
Yep.
But if I look at the pyramid, right? If I just look at the pyramid,
it says don't do that.
It doesn't say automate everything. It says automate what you can automate in some reasonable ratios that make it less effort for you to have automation. But I mean, automating unit tests in theory should be simple. They should be easy to run. They should be easy to run multiple times. So I want to automate everything I can.
And should.
Reasonable, right?
Can and should, right? I mean, not everything should be automated. And
no.
Yeah,
no.
there's some tests that just don't have enough value. They're not.
But I think that's the marketing fluff of let's say TDD proponents that have, there's always marketing fluff around things like Agile, DevOps, whatever. And someone will take, especially management, will take a message that they like to hear like we can deliver software faster, but they don't invest in how we do that. In automating everything, sorry.
Well, and all that really means is if the test is not automatable, we're not going to run it.
Yeah,
that's the practical import of that. And every time I've seen that played out, you'd start.
Not a great goal.
No, that's you definitely do not want to do that.
Well, I used to work with OCR software, optical character recognition, which is neural net and AI technology and complex decision engines. And did we?
Yeah, I just switching out of the pyramid.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, should have given you a heads up.
When we do that, and when we lean on things like AI and that type of technology, it's imperfect. It's very imperfect. So not for nothing, I don't want software testing my software only. So to me, automation is software testing software.
Yep.
I just, for me, there's a space to do something additional. That's, I don't know if I want to call it a spot check, insurance, but like you said, there are many things that can't be evaluated with automation. So we just need to stop that in its tracks. So every time I hear it, every time, we're having a conversation, especially with management, I like to just draw out, what is your goal here? Is your goal to run tests faster? What is your goal? If you help me understand your goal, I might be able to help you understand that automating everything isn't really going to get to it anyway.
Right. And it's really remarkable that we managed to get this far and to talk about metrics without getting to that point, right? The silly thing of the goal question metric, right? Don't start with the metric.
Yeah.
Start with the goal. What are you trying to accomplish? And then you say, okay, how would I recognize that I'm doing this effectively? How would I recognize that I'm doing it efficiently? How do I recognize that I'm doing it in a way that satisfies my stakeholders? And then once you've got that, you can start thinking about how would I measure those things, right? But yeah, if you're not starting with the goal, if it's just, hey, here's something I can measure. Ooh, I'll measure this, and now I'm going to put it in a PowerPoint, and I'm going to show it to management.
I had my 5-year-old niece, my goddaughter, over the weekend, and we're showing her not a ruler, but the tape measure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when she understood how it worked, she's measuring everything in the house.
Of course.
And just because you have a tape measure doesn't mean you just go beat everything with it. that's where I think we've got with some of these things. We have them, so that's what we lean on. And there's just one other question in here. A continuation. More than just the numbers, wants a way to talk about what's broken in the product. So as I was saying before, somebody just trying to decide, is it time to release? Are we ready to release? Is the product ready for release? Is the product ready for this customer, this environment, whatever it is? And I find it difficult to communicate that in terms of raw metrics. I find it difficult. I like coverage metrics. I like test conditions, which gets us to talk about certain, features and just, I don't want to say pass fail because I'm not shipping tests to the customer. What I'd rather say is this has been evaluated, this has not. Right.
So did you see the presentation that Julie did with me?
I got to see the beginning of it. I got to see the beginning of it, and then I had to jump out to join a class.
So she has a really interesting way of doing of presenting risk-based test results to be able to talk about here's where you still have risk, and here's where you've got less risk, and here's where we've done all we can to mitigate your risks.
Beautiful,
and of
isn't
course
it?
It's very nice because it disaggregates very nicely, but it also aggregates real well, so it gives you that kind of zoom in, zoom think.
And you see the trends, you see the movement, which I think management is looking for progress, right? So some of the metrics that they reach out for are just really telling them testing is happening.
Right.
And that's probably not enough
progress
to make
progress against the plan. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Stefano, to your point, if you are looking for information on that, you can catch Julie's webinar was recorded and is posted on our website. So if you want to take a look at her approach to that, there's also on the RBCS website a article that I co-wrote with Atsushi Nagata of Sony about a trend chart way of viewing residual risk and watching as it goes down based on the test being run. So there's a lot of ways, I think, of providing that insight.
Nice. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Anybody else?
It looks like we're out of questions and out of time. Fortunately, I got my hard stop at 2:30 moved, so I don't have a hard stop at 2:30. I have a hard stop at 3, but I think we'll honor our timeline, sort of.
It's a hot topic.
Yeah.
But we know that people struggle with it in all kinds of projects, in all kinds of industries, organizational structures, and it has been a pretty persistent thing. So it's good to bring the conversation to the forefront.
Right.
And one of the things that I got from Scott Barber was a suggestion. This came from the performance angle, right? When you're trying to figure out how to deliver data to anyone, right? It doesn't matter who the audience is. You show them something, right? And you say, what do you see here? You tell me what you see. And if you see something that I'm not trying to communicate, I go, okay, I'm not going to give that to you anymore. I'm going to give it to you like this, or we're going to look at it like this, or we're going to keep working until we have some mind share. We're syncing up.
Yeah.
And that can be a process of experimentation. And sometimes we're not brave enough to suggest that, but I think all of our audiences have different needs, and people process information in different ways. Right. Some people like big visual graphics, some people like really detailed things. It depends. So I don't necessarily know that there's a one size fits all, but I think it's a worthy endeavor to, keep knocking on the door and say, we got it right for now.
So have you ever read any of Tufte's work or?
I've been to Tufte's seminars.
Yeah, I've done them. Yeah, they are really mind expanding.
It blows your mind. The amount of information that can be crammed into a small visual, and the ways that information can be distorted if you just have the wrong scale, the wrong combination. Things like that. Area of focus, certain colors, pop out to people. All sorts of things. Beautiful books. Books of art is
they're fantastic books.
And his discipline is pure. We all hail Tufte from the performance testing vantage point. Huge.
Yeah, well, he has that what made me think of him was that quote that he has of, when you're designing any sort of graphic, table, etc., the first thing you want to think about is, what am I trying to make other people think about, right? What is a thinking task I want the viewer to engage in, right? Or not just, what fire hose of data can I hit them with?
Totally.
So we do have one last question, if you've got another minute here, and then we'll sign off. This is from Marta. This came in through the Q&A panel.
Oh, great. Okay.
Do you know of any metrics that would be beneficial in a product built on microservices? We have a lot of integration and contract tests, but not many end-to-ends based on requirements.
Marta, did you work with Scott Barber? Because he has exactly this issue right now.
Oh. So the way that I recommend to clients to think about coverage in the microservice kind of world is in terms of these endpoints and touch points and APIs and so forth, that, identify those. In fact, I'm working with a client right now where we're going through an exercise to do a risk assessment of all of their APIs, and then, to rank them based on that and to achieve adequate test coverage based on the risk ratings for each one of them, and try to drive the residual risk in those APIs down. So I think that would be the way that I would go about it, of just, you got data going out and data coming in, and, figure out where all those points are, and, try to say, hey, have we covered this, and does it work? Right.
And the tricky thing about it is to try to communicate something about a piece of the system when really your end users are only using the end-to-end, right? So it's like it's like forest in the trees problem.
Yeah.
So I know Scott's gig right now, they've got some in-house stuff, some SaaS and some cloud stuff, and they have a lot of contract testers. And so there's, you know, this sort of chaos is going on, and they measure that. Well, they report two things. One is the functional adequacy of the thing, and then it's the performance or response time of the thing, and then of the thing under load, right? So they're not metrics per se, they're measures and assessments, right? So I don't know how to roll it up into a nice tidy thing other than check marks. You know, we evaluated each of these things, but at the end of the day, if the end-to-end doesn't do what it needs to do, it doesn't matter how much service testing you've done, you're still going to get pounded for it.
Right. One thing you could potentially do is if you could draw a nice graph that shows all those connections and mark the connection as red, yellow, or green based on the status of the various tests that you've run across it. That might be a way of making it
like a
kind
heat
of like
map. Like I suggest people do that with a mind map and the functionality, but you could do it with all your microservices and your interfaces or your integration points. That's beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
Me likey. I think we should do that. Marta, why don't you do that and you send it to us?
Do that and send it to us. We'll give you feedback on it.
Let us know how it goes.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, good. We managed to go 15 minutes over. Well, 12 minutes over, but you know, hey, who's keeping score? So I'm going to go ahead and wind us down here with the usual pitch. Would point out, as I failed to mention in the earlier slide, Dawn is not only a colleague, but also does a lot of work with us at RBCS. Is one of our favorite training presenters. So if you're looking to get a course from RBCS and you're looking to have Dawn teach it, that is absolutely a possible thing. Happens frequently. So I hope you enjoyed this free webinar from RBCS to all the attendees. We do these free webinars as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS, we are a not just for profit company. That said, if you enjoy our free webinars and feel that they demonstrate solid insights to the kind of testing challenges you face, please make RBCS your preferred software testing vendor for any and all expert services, consulting, or training. Happy to provide a quote for any such help that you need. You can reach us at the coordinates shown on this page. So with that, thank you, Dawn, for putting in the time to talk about this fascinating topic. And I'm sure it was valuable to the attendees and was interesting to me as well. So thanks again. And then I'll see you on some Zoom screen or go to webinar where we all live these days.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Stefano, Marta, for your questions. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.